Dear viewer, we are privileged and honored to bring to you various recordings of devotees who have had first-hand experiences with Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba, also known as Swami. What's so special about these recordings is that these come from New Zealand, which is a small land in the Pacific Ocean. In these recordings, you're about to hear and witness some of the miracles, some of the teachings, and many of the fond memories that people have been able to experience by being in close proximity to the avatar. One of the key people who has been able to bring many across on these various pilgrimages has been the author extraordinaire Mata Betty. Mata Betty was the author of over 5 books, mainly charting the spiritual quest that she undertook over the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and all the way up to 2004. She was a Catholic by religion. However, she also had a universal awareness of what it is to be a good human being. She had numerous encounters with Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba in those years, and from her own diary, she had over 50 pilgrimages to India, and during these pilgrimages, she also enjoyed the close proximity of Bhagwan through various contexts, including interviews. Sairam. It's a very sunny day in Tauranga this afternoon, and we are very privileged to be interviewing Dr. Mike Godfrey. How would you like to be referred?
Most people call me Mike.
Mike, okay. Sairam, Mike. First of all, I would like to ask you something about yourself. You have been a medical practitioner as well as someone who has written and authored a very important book. Could you tell us something about your background and when was it that you first came to know of Sai Baba?
Okay, I graduated in 1963 in London, and for the first 7 years I worked in British hospitals, training with an idea of becoming a gynecologist, an obstetrician. But I got very disillusioned towards the end, and I started thinking about where I would like to live, and there was a blizzard blowing across England, and I was up near the Midlands, and I saw this job advertised in the British Medical Journal at a place called Mount Maunganui, and there just happened to be a New Zealand registrar in the same hospital, and he said, "Oh, it's a wonderful place, leading holiday resort, Mediterranean climate, big game fishing." Oh, it sounded like paradise. And I wrote off a letter, and a month later I found that I'd got the job over at the Mount, and I became a general practitioner, doing a fair bit of obstetrics and delivery, and I was a straightforward GP, writing out prescriptions. But again, I started getting a bit disillusioned, realizing that I wasn't actually helping my patients to remain healthy. I was just giving them prescriptions. And I started looking at other things. I attended weekend courses on different ologies. I got quite fascinated with basic homeopathy, especially for children. And this was the start, you might say, of moving away from standard medicine. My colleagues couldn't understand it or appreciate it, and I was also involved. Like, I was going over to the States to conferences where there were doctors that were practicing what is commonly alternative types of medicine, and some very skilled, including the treatment of people with environmental problems that were due to chemicals and metals. And I became more and more interested in this, and eventually I left the practice at the Mount. I just walked out and I came over to Tauranga and set up a clinic there. My main research interest centred around mercury and dental amalgam fillings. After one of the medical conferences, I think it was in San Francisco, a dentist gave a presentation which was unusual for a medical conference, and I found out for the first time that the so-called silver amalgam fillings that I had in my teeth as well were 50% mercury, and based on ordinary school chemistry, if you put different metals in a salt or acid solution, you get electrolysis and corrosion. And I had by then accumulated a number of patients where I diagnosed chronic fatigue and memory problems, etc., from their fillings, and they got better. So I thought I'd better do research into this more extensively, and I'd found out that you could do a challenge test by injecting a chemical into a vein, and it would drag out mercury if it was there. And I'd done 80 patients, and I was looking for some dental personnel to see what levels they had, but also looking for adults who had never had a filling. And one of my staff used to be a receptionist in a legal firm here in Tauranga, and she said, there's an Indian lawyer there who's joined the practice a little while ago, and I'm sure he hasn't got any fillings because he laughs quite a lot and it's all white. So I thought, oh, I'll ring him up. And this Indian lawyer, Muthu Krishna, I introduced myself, and he just happened to be 100 yards away from my clinic in Tauranga. And I said, I'm a doctor doing research into mercury, and by the way, do you have any amalgam fillings or whatever? And he said, no, I've never had any fillings. He came from Fiji, and I said, I'm doing research into it, and I want to find if people who've never had any amalgam fillings, what their mercury levels are. Would you let me give an injection into the vein? Now, can you imagine a lawyer, a completely strange doctor says, I want to inject something into a vein. And he said, oh, no, of course, no problem. And he came round, and I gave the injection, and we collected the urine, and Chris had a very high level of mercury. In fact, he'd had a heart attack in Auckland. He was in a high-profile criminal legal firm there and had a heart attack, and he was looking for somewhere where he could recover, doing a little bit of quiet conveyancing, and he had found 3 legal firms that wanted him, one in Hamilton, one in Rotorua, one in Tauranga. And the Tauranga one was the only one where there was some accommodations he wanted to rent close to the legal firm, so he chose Tauranga, and just happened to be 100 metres from where I worked. Well, I explained to Chris that I was doing chelation, which is a specific treatment for metal toxicity, and heart attacks. And Chris decided to have chelation, and I'd also just started an evening session for businessmen, and he was the only one at the beginning of that. So he would come in the evening, sit down in a lazy boy for the treatment, which lasted 3 hours, and he initially brought some papers, but then he realised that he relaxed and he'd often go to sleep, so he didn't. And then one day he came along with something to read, and he had a book with a strange looking man with afro hairstyle, and I just happened to look down and said, "Oh, who's that?" And he said, "Oh, this is a man called Sai Baba. Would you like to read it?" I said, well, 6 months later I was on my first trip to India to see Sai Baba. Again, it was one of these sort of coincidences. I'd had no real interest in going to India, but then I got an invitation to give a paper at a conference in Pune. And I thought, oh, I'll go to the conference and do Sai Baba on the way back. I have a couple of days in Buddha Party. No, you don't do Sai Baba in 2 days. I was sitting there, and it was about 13 or 14 rows back from where Sai Baba walks. And I watched from a distance, and every now and again he would have a handful of toffees or something, and he'd toss them. And in my naive innocence, I thought he was materialising these. He was just getting a fistful of a plate. Well, one of these toffees came sailing through the air and landed right in my lap, and I was way, way back. And this blew me away. I thought, whoa, oh, cosmic toffee from Swami. Yeah. And then 6 months later I was back again with Mata Betty, this time, and the start of a regular journey. But he demonstrated in so many ways that he knew everything, and the omnipresence. Now this is something that we glibly, it doesn't matter what faith, we just glibly say God is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, the 3 omnis. But do we actually live as if He's omnipresent? It means there's nowhere where God is not. And there were just little incidences that made me realise that this is something, and changed my whole attitude to life and everything else, and realisation of the privilege of practicing medicine. Now, this was in the 1990s, and I had a big game fishing boat, and all sorts of, all the rods and reels and everything. I gave it all away. I said, there's no way that I can indulge in that sort of pursuit. There are more important things to do. And it's funny, thinking back, when you first realise this awesome, fundamental thing about God, I relate it to honey. Now, if you'd never experienced or heard of honey, and somebody tells you about honey, it's not enough to hear about it. You've got to taste it. And I think it's the same with Sai Baba. You can read about it, but you've really got to experience it. And the trips that I went over, initially, I think this happens to all of the, you might say, long-term devotees. Initially it's all fun and games and delightful experiences. But then you start to, it gets a bit more serious on both sides. You realise that it's not just for fun. There's a lot of joy in it, but it is serious. And he was. I had the habit of doing things without thinking. And one day, this was at Bangalore at
Whitefield.
Whitefield, yeah. I was helping out in the kitchen. I mean, the least you can do when you're a guest somewhere is to help with the dishes and all this sort of thing. And we were peeling potatoes, a group of us, with a big tub and big pot in the middle with water, and we'd put the potatoes in it. And I peeled a potato and I just tossed it in and splashed dirty water on the white trousers of the others, and that said, hey, think before you do anything. Something so silly, really. It was again at Whitefield. I went there, and I always take my homeopathic travel kit with the basic things, and again I was helping in the kitchen, helping Veronica, and all of a sudden it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I knew there was no work to do in the kitchen, but for some reason I decided that I had to go there and just see. And as I walked in, Veronica was talking to an Australian woman who had just asked if they had any soup, because there was a young Australian woman in her team who had been very, very sick with vomiting and diarrhea, and they were organising things for her to go back to Australia the next day. And I said, hey, if you want, I've got some homeopathic drops that I could give her. And went round to her and gave a little bottle of drops, and I said, take these until tomorrow, then drop them back so that I can get the bottle back, which they duly did. And then I suppose it was around a week or so later, I was walking in the ashram, and this brunette walked up to me and said, you don't recognise me, but I was the Australian girl that you gave those drops to, and within hours I was completely well. And the next day we got an interview, and she had a beautiful diamond ring on her finger that Swami had materialised for her. So he had to do something to prevent her going back to Australia. So he used me, you might say, and I felt very humble, and that I was an instrument, you might say.
Just focusing on that, Doctor, you have helped many people by looking at their pain as opposed to what the coinage and the term that the American pathologist Majid Ali has used to describe modern day medicine, N2D2, name of disease equals name of drug.
Yeah, N2D2.
Yes. So from your perspective as a person who has brought about healing as well as helping patients over a number of years, may I add, because if you graduated in the 60s, we are talking about at least a good 50 years,
yeah,
and you're still batting on.
I'll be 80 next month,
right?
God willing.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a calling that you have had with regards to the practice of medicine, and just your insights into what made you change? Was it after coming across someone who's considered to be an avatar and his directives to modern day medical practitioners of how to heal the body, or did your search start even before coming to Sai?
I was well before coming to Sai, that I realised that there was a better way to practice medicine. In fact, if we look at going back 100 years, there was a better form of medicine, you might say, as far as caring for the whole body and guiding. The initial term of the doctor is teacher, to teach. The ancient Chinese physicians, they only got paid when they got the patient well. They didn't get any pay otherwise, and they often had to take the medicine themselves. But they looked at the whole body in a remarkably modern way when you consider that we're moving from the standard, what we call allopathic drug-oriented medicine, now to energy medicine. And I see within another decade or so that if the medical profession does not move away from its hidebound situation where they've been taken over by an industry, they'll be left behind, because the naturopaths, who will have access to all the modern electronic equipment, which looks at the electrical body, just as a sort of picture, the physical body is basically a bag of water with 9 holes filled with a chemical soup that follows you around, because you're not the body. We say, I have my hand, my head, my foot, therefore my body means you're not the body. So what are you? Pure energy. And the way that biological research is going on, especially into anti-aging medicine, where there's potential for huge amounts of money to be made, they're looking at how to make diseased tissues and diseased organs revert back to healthy by, with laser technology, feeding in the template or the resonance of healthy, youthful. And the Russians and Chinese are way ahead of us in this, looking at how to improve it. So I see, and this is where homeopathy comes in as well. It is very scientific. Back in the 60s, a bunch of French biologists, using modern equipment, were able to demonstrate and prove scientifically that you could take samples of quite complex substances, caffeine, nicotine, adrenaline, and using a device, a technology, make a copy into water electronically, just like copying an audio tape. I mean, how do you copy a tape? You just press the right buttons and you've got a copy. Nothing's taken off the initial one, it's all electronic. And just like the detractors of homeopathy say, they've analysed the water and can't find any arnica in it, I tell them, well, okay, here's an audio tape of Pavarotti. Go and get it analysed and see if they can find Pavarotti. they won't. It's a resonance. See? And because this is also holographic, it fits in perfectly with the concept of the holographic universe, and also the fact that in a hologram every part contains the whole. So Sai Baba in a holographic universe is everywhere. We just don't know it, or we don't appreciate it. And this, once I started really thinking about this, I have yet to totally surrender. Swami wants us to surrender and be an instrument. I still have your glass of wine. But I think that my life has been, it's been hugely different, and I think better for all that. I've got a videotape of an old man at Puddapati called Brigadier Bose.
Yes, we know Brigadier Bose, one who built the stupa.
Yeah, I found out where he lived, and I spent an hour with him and videoed what he was talking, and he demonstrated to me what it is to be a genuine instrument that accepted challenges that were basically impossible. But because Swami said it will be done, he said, right, of course, it'll be done. And this is an example of total surrender and acceptance, which is I was very privileged to meet this old man and learnt a lot from him.
Just focusing on your various pilgrimages, now you mentioned that you have traveled from New Zealand with Mata Betty. Can you just share with us your memories of these wonderful times in Prashanti, as well as your experiences?
Yeah, I think it was the first time I was right at the back, and it was just a matter of watching, and it was pretty awesome seeing the manifestations, things like that. Then the second time was interesting because I was only able to stay 2 weeks, and they were there for a month, and I was going to be there for the second 2 weeks. And Ma told me later that she asked for interview Swami, and then Swami turned around and said, "Doctor's not here yet." But the day after I got there, I got an interview, and it was again an example of his knowing everything. Yes, I think it was at that one or the one after. I followed the New Zealand group in, and found myself sitting right next to Swami. He was here and I was sitting there. And he'd manifested one or two things, and he turned to me all of a sudden and said, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, yes. But as a qualified yes, because I think what we're finding out is far more than that narrow perspective. And saw his hand wave, and he produced a rather massive gold ring with a crucifix on it, which I found out afterwards. I didn't have a good view of it, but he showed it to the others. And then he turned to me and he said, "Cross or Baba," just like that. And I can still remember the feeling from deep inside, Baba. And he held it there and he just blew on it 3 times. And it turned into a silver ring with Shirdi Sai Baba on it. And he slipped it onto my finger, and I had no real interest in the previous incarnation. I'd read the book on Shirdi, and a few days later I was again walking in the ashram, and this elderly Indian gentleman in immaculate Punjabi suit suddenly walked straight up to me and said, "You got a Shirdi ring, haven't you?" And I wasn't showing it. I said, yes. He said, "Do you know why?" And I said, "No." And pulled out a notebook and wrote on it,
Wow, that is the very writing?
yes, this is, well, initially it's in Hindi, I think, and then it says, "When this fakir takes to someone, he stays with him in every life." And
fakir is the term that they use to refer
the
to
beggar.
Baba.
Yeah, to
Yes.
Shirdi, yeah. And I looked down at it and read it, and I looked up and he'd gone.
Wow.
And you could think, well, maybe I was one of the workers with Shirdi,
Yes.
and he was saying, "Caught up with you, mate." I mean, it's
Fascinating.
I read a bit more about Shirdi.
And the person appeared out of nowhere
Yeah.
and knew that you had a ring,
Yes.
which only you would have known and the people in the interview room.
Well,
No
that's
one would
right.
have known. The ashram is full of
That's right.
thousands of people.
Yeah. I think it was a year before I could get back. And shortly before I left to India, the Shirdi ring disappeared. I had it on my finger when I left home, and at that time I was only 100 metres from my clinic, 18th Avenue around Fraser Street, and I walked the whole pavement. There's nothing there. And I mean, it wasn't all that tight, but it wasn't that loose either. I thought, oh well, maybe I don't need it anymore. And I guess I'm going back to India. And I went back, and again we got an interview, and I was the last to walk in. And Swami was standing right in the doorway, as he does, and as I inched past him, I saw his hand waving, and I thought he was making vibhuti for the ladies, which he usually did. And he got hold of my hand, and he put a ring on it with 3 diamonds, and didn't say anything. He just put it on as if to welcome me back. And I initially had it on my finger and showing it off a bit, but then I dropped it, and one of the stones disappeared or fell out, and I couldn't find it. So I said, no, I'm going to make certain I don't lose this one. It's going round my neck. And this cord is old commercial fishing line. It's about 400 kg breaking strain. My head would come off before that ring goes. So it's right next to my heart where it should be.
So around about which year was this? In the mid-90s?
Yeah, late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah, Ma was still pretty active, but beginning to get a bit frail.
Yes.
I only went to India once more after Ma stopped, and I went there on my own. Oh no, I went for a Christmas. I decided to go for one Christmas. That was beautiful. That really was beautiful. With the choir. I wasn't in the choir because I was not exactly good at singing. But Arthur told me to volunteer as part of looking after it, and one day I was told to guard the stairs going at the side of the stage back to his thing. So that's all I had to do, was just make certain that it. And I remember when, after Swami had given the discourse, he was walking back up the stairs. I looked across and I had this, he's getting a little pot. I could see just a little thing. And he just turned round and glared at me as if to say, whoops. Yeah.
Must have been amazing times.
Yeah, they were lovely times. I much preferred Whitefield. That I thought, because it's how real it was. I know that's my impression. At Puttaparthi he's Shiva. At Whitefield he's Krishna. It's a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit lighter. Yeah, and of course with Ma, as he made certain that if we'd had some privileges, including interview, the next days from then on we'd be in the back blocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, for people who have never been to see Sai and who have not had the physical contact, how would you describe Sai Baba to someone who's only heard about him? Is it even possible to describe who Sai Baba is?
Yeah, that's a good question. He's the very antithesis. The physical body is the very antithesis of what one would think of as something majestic. Here's this diminutive form with afro hairstyle, so incredibly unusual, totally different, of course, to Shirdi. Fortunately, at least one good picture, one photograph of him, which I've got at home, completely different from that gaunt man. And thanks to Arthur, we know reasonably well what Prema Sai is going to look like, with straight hair, more usual, you might say. But I think he would have chosen this body to demonstrate that we should forget about the physical. It's just it's a vehicle. And he's that much more than that little 5 foot something body. We need to move away from the physical and realization that God can take on any form, any time, any number of forms, any time. It doesn't matter what form you want to visualize. And this is what makes it so ridiculous, so stupid, to have different religions and my form is better than your form, etc. And nothing will change until children are taught to realize this omnipresence of any form. and realise who they are and what they are and why they are. And with my further research and reading that I've got in my book, the realization that we have been here before, and quite likely many, many, many times. And of course for that we can thank the books on and the research into the near-death experience. Once, that's back in the 70s, and these people can relate what their experiences were, and then the past life experiences just totally changes what one does in life, because if you realise that you take these aphorisms and axioms that are in the Bible and no doubt in the Quran and elsewhere, basically, do unto others as you would they do unto you. If only they would carry that on to say, because after death you are going to experience what those other people experienced as a result of your actions, and you will need to choose your next life in order to clear that karmic debt. And then again, this makes you live a different thing. All these terrorists and things like that, if they only knew what they were doing. What's worse is what happens to those that direct them to do it. But I guess we still have to have the wars and everything on this planet, the killing fields, for people to get rid of their karmic debt.
It's a good segue into your book. If I'll just ask you to hold it up for us for the camera. And this particular book, titled "What's the Matter? A Doctor's Journey into Our Innate Spirituality."
Yeah.
This is an award-winning book, and it has been quite well researched, especially when it comes to the emphasis, or rather a new way of looking at human beings. Because previously the emphasis was on fixing symptoms, which can't regard for the energies that keep the body together, let alone any inner spiritual aspects, as you have captured in your book. And you have also done a wonderful historical case studies and research, and you mention people who have produced some amazing literature. For instance, Bernie Siegel's book Love, Medicine and Miracles, and you go on to say it's an inspiring book by a very caring surgeon who basically founded the patient support group Exceptional Cancer Patients. In New Zealand, we are aware that you have worked in this area of helping people with cancer, and you know, if I recall correctly, you have also used some bioresonance diagnostic techniques to actually do this particular area of work and to help many people.
Still am.
Yes.
That's what I'm doing, because cancer doesn't take a holiday, and so through the next 2 weeks I'm still seeing patients every Thursday. Getting back to the origin of the book, I had this feeling I'd like to write a book about Swami. Many others had this feeling as well. I wanted his approval, and I asked him in the interview room whether I could write a book, and he said, yes, good for patients, And I heard this as Patients, patience, my patience. So directed more at the lay people, you might say. But as the years went by, because I thought every time I thought I'd finished it, something came up. Somebody said, "Hey, have you heard of this book? Heard of this person?" And I had to keep on adding to it, and the years went by. And I think it was Martha Betty who might have said to me, maybe he said, "Patience, have patience, because it's going to take a while." And it turned out to be the first book to be published after he left the physical.
Wow.
Then. But yes, I started looking, I was asked to help people with cancer, but usually after everything had failed. So again, it was a matter of gently going into the spiritual side. And one or two remarkable I had a very good old friend, Derek Kavanagh. He was very, very spiritual. I regarded him as a sort of wandering monk, as it were. And he agreed to head a discussion group that we ran every Wednesday evening at my old clinic for patients and their partners, to have an hour where they would sit in a circle and discuss things, and then finish up with a meditation. Derek was very good at guided meditation. One of these patients was a man that had colon cancer that had spread to the liver, and they tried to deal with the tumours in the liver. One was 6 centimetres, another was 4 centimetres. They even tried putting liquid nitrogen in to try and freeze them. Nothing worked, and eventually they said, "Go home with nothing more." And when he came to me, he was a very disillusioned, depressed man, late 60s and 70s, and we started on the various things that I did, and after, he'd only been given a few months, but after about 4 months, Masters swimming competitions are on in 6 months. Should I register? I've always competed in the Masters. I said, of course. He survived. He competed. He won a couple of gold medals. And the months went by. He told me one day, I had a picture of Swami on the wall in my clinic, and he said, that man, because he'd heard about Sai Baba talking, see, he came to me in a dream. And he was scrubbing the kitchen table with me. And he said, I wonder what it meant. And I didn't, maybe he's scrubbing away some of the dirt, But he then said to me, the world champs are coming up next year in Melbourne. Should I register? It was 18 months. I said, of course. He went and competed, and again he won 1 or 2 gold medals. And he came back and he was absolutely stuffed. He was so tired. And within a couple of months he just faded away and died in his sleep. Now, looking at that case, you could say, well, he died. Oh, yes, but what a difference from being a very despondent, depressed man in pain. He achieved something phenomenal, you might say, and he was at peace with himself when he died. Another man, the hospice asked me, if I could help him. He was a retired police inspector from Africa, Rhodesia, and I thought, well, a pretty tough cookie here. He'd been to Mexico and he'd come back with a whole lot of stuff from the Mexican clinic, and the hospice wasn't happy about giving them any, so they were looking for somebody who could give them. So he and his wife were up at a little kiwi fruit block, Rohini, and I'd go up there in the evening after work and have a beer with him and a chat. Nearly lost him a week after we first met, but managed to sort it out. And again, the months went by, and after we started these discussions of the spiritual aspect, he started to send his wife down to the library and get books, Yogananda and things like that. And about 5 or 6 months later, he said to me, "Mike, a friend of ours dropped down dead on the golf course the other day, and people saying, wasn't he lucky? What a quick, easy way to go." And he said, "No, I don't think so." He said, "I wouldn't want to do that. I have learnt, and I'm learning so much in the last few months, that I see the cancer as a great blessing, because he's been able to, again, find out that spiritual aspect. So many people die in fear. They don't know what they're going to. I couldn't persuade my uncle, mind you. My uncle lived in Belgium, because I originally come from over there, and he was dying of prostate cancer. He was 80. I'd gone over there to spend Christmas with my father before bringing him back to New Zealand to live. And Tony, my Uncle Tony, was a convinced atheist. And he said, "Mike, it's oblivion, total oblivion, that's it." And all I could say is, "Well, Uncle Tony, you're in for a pleasant surprise."
That's right.
But then from what I've read, he could have oblivion for a while, because that's what he expects. And what you think of,
You
become for a while. So,
amazing.
yeah, I mean, when you die, you want to be, when you come into, if you thought about this, when you come into the earth, when you're born, you're crying and everybody's laughing. When you die, you want to be laughing and let them do the crying.
Absolutely right. And one aspect that we have been very lucky is being very close to Sai has been done because of the role that Mata Betty played in New Zealand. She was able to take many people and to explain things very clearly, especially for people who are not familiar with India and the concept of an avatar. Do you want to say something about your experiences with Mata Betty as a person leading pilgrimages? Because many people go on pilgrimages, but what about the discipline that you need to have?
She was a disciplinarian, sure. You very quickly realise you don't, no messing about, no wandering away in the coffee shops and things. You were there for a purpose, and made no bones about it. We used to go around to her room and sit down there quietly and discuss things, and the newcomers, she would tell them. And one visit, we were practicing a song that Ma wanted, given the chance, we could sing it in the interview to Swami.
In English?
Yes, yes. And it was a lovely song where we held his hands while we were singing it. Those held his hand, others holding his feet. But we just finished practicing it, and I was sitting on a bed. They were sitting on the floor or the other bed. There were two beds in the room. And all of a sudden Ma said, "Who threw that?" And we turned out, "What, Ma?" She said, "This. Who threw this at me?" It was a toffee.
A toffee. Another toffee. A cosmic toffee.
And we said, "Ma, nobody would have dared to do that." You know. It dropped out of the ceiling in her lap as if to sign of approval. She offered it round and said, "No, Ma, you have it."
Yes. And were you able to sing that song to Si?
Oh yes, we sang it, and holding his feet and it was a lovely little song. But you know, you did what Marty wanted us to do, and then everything was nice and smooth. She knew what had to be done, the important things, the discipline, the protocol. I mean, you're going there and you form the lines and you go in and things like that. And you don't rush and you don't push. And I think this reflected on the fact that we were blessed to get interviews. We've got all the tens of thousands that were there. I was there for the 70th birthday, and there were a lot of people there. There really were. I mean, coming out of the auditorium, out of the big auditorium, out in the fields, there's a narrow gate and this huge crowd, and for some reason I wanted to see somebody, so I sort of stopped, and I was standing there like a rock with a flow of people, and eventually I gave up and turned, and I went out with this massive crowd, and my feet were actually lifted off the ground, and I had one of these small paperback books that you buy in the little library there, and it was forced out somehow and was just trampled into confetti by the crowd.
Sometimes it is in the millions, I have heard, who turn up for the big birthday.
As he said, apparently many years ago, that enjoy me while you can, because I'll be an orange dot in the distance, and the sky would be. Yeah.
Well, Doctor, it has been a privilege to be here in your wonderful clinic, where you have continued to help and serve many people who are in need. And sometimes, based on your conversations, it is not just the medical things looking after the body, but it looks like you have also touched their mind and also aspects of their spiritual being, and identified the full spectrum of what Swami has been saying: one that you think you are, one that others think you are, and the one that you truly are.
Yeah.
So with the final emphasis, would you like to share with us any of your concluding remarks as we conclude this wonderful interview today?
You mentioned just a little while ago, lucky. Think of it a different way. L-U-C-K, luck. Living under correct knowledge. So it's a completely different perspective on good luck.
Yes.
And once you have this knowledge, your life, there may be ups and downs, but the passage is smooth. I think in the book I said that karma is like a cloud of dust following your car on an unsealed road in summer. Eventually you run out of petrol and that cloud will catch up and dump right on you. But if you can get on the tar seal, you can leave the dust behind. And I think this is the same. You find a teacher and you become aware of the real purpose of life. Things change. They change for the better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.